Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. And just allow me a few seconds before getting started just to consume some water, please. I think this is one of the most important motions brought to this House, perhaps over the last decade or so. And even in having, this motion is so important, Madam Presiding Officer, that former Chief Secretary, Mr. Charles, couldn't help himself but break his own rule and return to this honorable House. In fact, you may be unaware of the fact that Mr. Charles has not been into this august chamber for quite a while. How many years? From 2007, Mr. Charles has not returned to this House until this very day in March of 2022. And that is noteworthy, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, the motion I wish to present reads as follows. Whereas Section 25(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996 provides as follows, without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the Assembly in relation to Tobago be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of matters set out in the 5th schedule, and whereas Section 25(2) of the said Act empowers the Assembly to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its powers or for the discharge of its duties. And whereas tongue and country planning is one of the matters set out in the 5th schedule as item number 15, and whereas the institutional structure has not been put in place to implement this function, be it resolved that this House authorize the Executive Council to take immediate steps to establish the institutional structure for the implementation of the tongue and country planning function by the Assembly in accordance with the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the things that we campaigned on and we gave as a mandate pledge to the people of Tobago is that we will bring tongue and country planning function to the Assembly and to the people of Tobago. And so I am happy today. I am happy today that I have this opportunity to do just that, to signal to the people of Tobago, and by extension, the people of Trinidad, and of course, the government of Trinidad, I know they will be listening keenly, that the THA is ready to put on its big boy's clothes, its big man's clothes, and take up the function as delegated to it in the law. It is regrettable, Madam Presiding Officer, that Act 40 of 1996 gave us this authority, this executive authority. And between 1996 and 2001, some efforts were started to allow for the full functioning of tongue and country planning within the local space, in the Tobago space. In 2001, a wind of change came, and sometimes when new political parties take office, they're guilty of not continuing the good things and just throwing away everything. And so, in their zeal and perhaps hatred for the former Chief Secretary, they threw away everything with all the work done with town and country planning at the time, and proceeded to allow Trinidad to rule over us with regards to town and country planning. To me, Madam Presiding Officer, this is an indictment. This is a sad reality. We cannot, on one hand, be making noise for greater autonomy and on the other hand, refuse to take up our functions as per the law. And this THA is signaling clearly that while we fight for greater autonomy, those fifth schedule matters belong to the people of Tobago, and we will carry out those functions with respect to the law. And let me signal one time that those seventh schedule matters that mandate that several public offices actually have offices in Tobago and deliver their function in Tobago, and they have not been doing so. I want to signal to all of you all who stick up down in Trinidad and not bringing the office up here as per law, that I will be writing you and instructing you as per the law to bring those offices to Tobago, or I will go to court and force them to come to Tobago. The THA must be respected. And one of the reasons why we spent a lot of time this morning talking about tub and tiles and lights and a driveway, and whether or not the residents should look this way or not, or whether we should use our government quarters or not, or whether we should live with an awning hanging on by mossy threads or not, is because a group of people in Tobago has caused Tobagonians to not even respect the institution of the THA. This is not county council. This is not the THA of 1980, when not even the position of secretaries were legislated for, and when the clerk of the house was the top public servant on the island. This is a THA that got significantly devolved functions as per Act 40 of 1996. And as flawed as that act might be, we have to be grateful to former president, former prime minister, and former chairman of the THA, Mr. A.N.R. Robinson, for bringing it to the house and ensuring that we got some updates. In fact, most of you public servants who might be listening and watching, most of you teachers, most of you working in the system will not enjoy what you have today if the THA did not get significantly more devolved responsibilities. And so you must be grateful for that. The matter of town and country planning is an urgent one, Madam Presiding Officer. It's urgent because it is 21 going on 22 years late. It is urgent, Madam Presiding Officer, because Tobago's development, especially its infrastructural development, is still in the hands of strangers. I was inspired to place this in the PDP mandate, and the reason why we call it a mandate and not a manifesto is because the things contained therein were things given to us by the people of Tobago as we engaged with them. And I engaged with a well-known Tobagonian, a well-known businessman. And he said to me, he said, Farley, when I was building this house, it was originally denied by Town and Country Planning. In order to query it, I had to send the files to Trinidad, jump on a plane and go down Trinidad to convince Trinidadians who know nothing about with space that I could build this house where I want to build this house. And what is even more egregious than that is that we have a Town and Country Planning unit being headed by someone on contract who should have been retired donkey years now, gone past the age, working age, long time, from Trinidad, heading our unit, telling us what to do, how to do it, and what we can't do, as determined by people down in Trinidad. Now, the law is clear that the Tobago House of Assembly should have as a function town and country planning. And I want to start by going into the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. So you will understand first and foremost why this function is rightfully the Tobago House of Assembly's function, and nobody could legally stop us from taking it. If you go to section 74 of the Constitution, section 74 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago says, the executive authority of Trinidad and Tobago shall be vested in the president, and subject to this constitution may be exercised by him either directly or through officers subordinate to him. 74.2 says, without prejudice to the generality of subsection 1, which I just read, the supreme command of the armed forces of Trinidad and Tobago shall be vested in the president, and the exercise of this power shall be regulated by law. And then it goes to subsection 3, which is the most important part. Section 74, subsection 3, it says, nothing in this section shall prevent Parliament from conferring functions on persons or authorities other than the President. Let me read that again, Madam Presiding Officer. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago says that nothing in this section, in section 74, shall or can prevent the Parliament from conferring functions, as in government functions on persons or authorities other than the President. And so, Act 40 of 1996 was really an act of Parliament that sought to confer on the people of Tobago a function that ordinarily we will not have. Act 40 of 1996 was the Parliament saying, look, these set of functions, as identified by the 5th schedule, 33 initially, and about 3 others were scheduled later on, these functions, we are going to take them away from the Parliament, we are going to take them away from the President, and we are going to delegate it to the people of Tobago through an institution called the Tobago House of Assembly. And so, in essence, while the National Parliament retains its function for making policy, and policy is really lawmaking. I mean, we claim to be making policy in the THA, but without lawmaking ability, are we really making policy, or are we just making demands? But policy is really through the act of making laws. And so, through the law that is Act 40 of 1996, we were delegated functions. The Parliament is still the only law-making body in the country. So how does the interplay between the THA and the central government, how is that supposed to work? Well, it means that for everything you see in the 5th schedule, where there is an accompanying act that says minister, it is not a minister or a ministry in Trinidad that is supposed to do it. It should be an equivalent line secretary or the Tobago House of Assembly that is supposed to do it. Because we are charged here with the responsibility based on section 74.3 of the Constitution, backed up by Act 40 of 1996, to carry out these functions. And so one of those functions, really and truly, is the function for town and country planning. Now, this matter for consideration was already carried to the Executive Council, and the Executive Council authorized moving this motion so that we can then move to the place of building out our town and country planning function. And let me say early up that this does not mean that we will set up our town and country planning function and just send home everybody that is working in the current town and country planning office in Tobago. What we will do is that we will subsume them into the functions as being delegated to the Tobago House of Assembly. The Assembly's authority is enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago by way of Chapter 11A, Section 141A, where it states inter alia that there shall be an assembly for Tobago, to be called the Tobago House of Assembly, in this chapter referred to as the Assembly, and also 141b, that says, subject to this constitution, the Assembly shall have such powers and functions in relation to Tobago as may be prescribed, sorry. And those functions were prescribed in the 5th schedule. It amazes me that for this length of time, that nobody thought it necessary to take up this function, and it might just be a case of sheer laziness. The powers and functions of the assembly mentioned in the Constitution are prescribed in the TH Act of 1996. Section 25(1) of the Act says, without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the assembly in relation to Tobago be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of the matters set out in the 5th schedule. And as I stated before, town and country planning is item number 15 on that schedule. It further states in section 25(2) of the THA Act, for better performance of its functions, the assembly is hereby empowered to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its power or the discharge of its duties. Town and country planning is one of those duties highlighted for us, and we are taking it up one by one. Two principal elements of land use planning are development planning and development control. Development planning entails the framing of a spatial development strategy and the land use plan, which aims to provide a uniform, effective, and comprehensive system of land use management and incorporates the use of spatial data, which is Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. The second component of planning function is development control. This element of the function deals with the control of land use and the regulation of the detailed aspects of physical development, and is an essential part of planning, as it is the prerequisite for orderly implementation of development plans of the citizenry, private and commercial entities alike. In the current dispensation, this is where the THA must become active, primarily through its public health and infrastructure departments. The planning department, however, oversees the process and sign off on the final approval. And while I'm at it, let me point out how crazy it was for Tobago to wake up a day and decide, because somebody said Germans were buying out all the lands in Tobago, that we will take the authority for foreign direct investments on our land and send it back to Trinidad and tell a minister in Trinidad, take your time, based on how you feel, you decide who foreigner could buy land in Tobago. The Tobagonians who decided that were not real Tobagonians. They were Papi Show Tobagonians, pseudo Tobagonians, because real Tobagonians understood in that moment and still understand that, one, the majority of the outsiders who are buying lands in Tobago are not foreigners, are Chinese. And guess what? They need no license. They need no approval from anybody. They could come and buy without you. And secondly, real Tobagonians also understood then and understand now that if we are to have a land licensing regime, and I think there must be some kind of regime so that there will be some controls. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe in a carte blanche arrangement for anybody to walk in from anywhere and buy. But that regime should and must be organized by the THA, not central government. Not central government. In fact, that's a dereliction of duty based on the law and should not have happened. It was ill-advised, but it has happened. And as I said, one by one, the THA will be taking up all of its functions that we have not taken up before. Currently, Madam Presiding Officer, the enforcement component of development control is shared between the Town and Country Planning Division and of the Ministry of Planning, not even THA, of the Ministry of Planning, and the Tobago House of Assembly agencies, notably the Public Health Department and the Infrastructure Department. This Executive Council noted that and that's the one we passed a week ago, noted that the legal instrument established for carrying out the functions of Town and Country Planning is the Town and Country Planning Act 3501. But by THA Act of 1996, the Parliament has conferred on the people of Tobago through the THA the functions of Town and Country Planning in Tobago. It should not be any ministry doing that in Tobago. It should be the THA by law. The ministry doing that in Tobago is out of place and out of order legally, and we have to put a stop to that. The Executive Council also noted that in the past decade and a half, successive central government administrations have attempted to reform and enhance the legislation governing Town and Country Planning, resulting in the enactment of the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, PAFD, in 2014. The PAFD takes cognizance of the statutory role and authority of the THA. The Planning and Facilitation of Development Act stipulates that the National Planning Authority, which is the principal organ of the PAFD Act, must consult with the THA in the performance of its functions. So the latest act that was done in 2014 recognizes the authority of the THA, but the THA, up until now, did not recognize its own authority. The act recognizes that the authority of the Assembly and stipulates in section 16 that the NPA shall not prepare development plans for Tobago, shall not determine applications for Tobago, and shall not discharge development controls in Tobago. So the 2014 Act, all of which is yet to be proclaimed, recognizes the authority of the THA. The THA apparently did not recognize its own authority. The full activation of this act remains outstanding 8 years after its enactment, and there is no known timeline for its implementation. And notwithstanding that fact, certain sections of the act were proclaimed in 2015. The sections proclaimed deal particularly with the establishment of the NPA, which is the administrative arm of the act. The transition phase to full proclamation of the PFD Act involves a readiness assessment by municipal corporations, but these activities are currently being undertaken by the Assembly. In fact, on my first day in office, on the 13th of December, when I visited that PRDI building, I was shown an empty space, and I was told this is where the function of Town and Country Planning will come. Just an empty space, but nothing else, no computers, no desks, nothing else to do to carry out the function. And further to recognizing the THA as the authority for planning in Tobago, the PFD Act restricts the Minister of Planning from authorizing the National Planning Authority to 1, determining applications for Tobago, to 2, discharging development control function in Tobago. And it should be noted that this section of the PFD Act has not been proclaimed. Nobody didn't proclaim it yet, but we do not need it to be proclaimed because the law is clear. Town and Country Planning as a function belongs to the THA, whether they proclaim this entire act or not. Accordingly, the Assembly, in its quest to give effect to the full implementation of Section 25 and the 5th Schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996, as it relates to Town and Country Planning function, also relies on Section 74(3) of the Constitution that I read at the start of my presentation. To complete institutional structure, provisions for appeals from decisions of a regulatory authority is normally incorporated. It is a critical feature of any legislation that impacts citizens' right to the use of property, And I gave an anecdote of one Tobagonian who had to travel to Trinidad to make that query. And I tell you this today, Tobagonians, when this motion is passed, we'll be moving post haste to setting up town and country planning in Tobago. You will no longer have to interact whatsoever with Trinidad to get your approvals or to make your queries. Accordingly, as a prerequisite for full implementation of the town and country planning function, a number of actions outlined are required. One, there has to be the establishment of a physical planning unit within the Department of Planning, and an organizational structure was already done as advised by those with institutional knowledge. The transfer of archival and current information relative to all land use matters pertaining to Tobago from the Ministry of Planning to the Planning Department of the THA, and I don't suspect we will get any resistance from the Ministry of Planning to transfer those archived documents. If we do, I have courthouse closed and we'll be heading there. Thirdly, the establishment of a specifically appointed team to clear the backlog of unprocessed applications. And in a while, I will tell you why that is so and how some of the agencies have hundreds of applications languishing on their desks. Fourth, the consultation, revision, completion, and publication relative to the Tobago Spatial Development Strategy and Land Use Plan. Fifth, the automation of the application and the approval process for land use customized for Tobago, because we're going digital. We're not going with all this sort of paper thing. We're trying to make it digital and make it simpler while we are also doing this. Six, we have to have preparation of process for public review of complex types of application for land use. In other words, what we are saying is, once it is a complex sort of land use arrangement, the public must have a say. The public must be able to weigh in. The public must be able to go on our website and see this hotel that's being built, right? And you know, as I'm on that point, Madam Presiding Officer, I learned, not surprisingly so, after my first meeting last week with the entity that is to build in Marriott in Tobago, I learned from them that the whole plan, the whole proposal for Marriott, the whole decision for Marriott was made, and the principals in that business had not had a single conversation with the THA before it was announced and before it was assigned to them. I don't know what THA were running. Clearly, it was a puppy show in this house. And Mr. Charles had a right not to return since 2007 because we weren't doing the functions assigned to us. How can a major hotel development be procured for Tobago, done in Trinidad, and nobody and talk to the THA formally before it was awarded? That not happening under my watch. That I can assure you, Madam Presiding Officer. Seventh, there must be the establishment of a community planning forum for rotational planning visits to communities to understand and promote community initiative and input, and to provide appropriate advice to communities on planning matters. 8, a proposal for a sustained communications process on planning matters. And 9, a motion such as this must be passed in this house in order to give it teeth and to give it the right to be actioned. Accordingly, Madam Presiding Officer, as the Chief Secretary, I'm also the Secretary for Planning. And that's why this motion seeks, in essence, to recommend an urban and regional planning unit be established in the Department of Planning for the implementation of town and country planning function in accordance with Section 25 and the 5th Schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996. And again, I will have published the flowchart for that organizational structure. Secondly, there must be appropriate steps taken to ensure the transference to the Department of Planning all records information and other resources relative to the performance of the Tongue and Country Planning function in Tobago from the Ministry of Planning. Madam Presiding Officer, should this motion pass today, and I have no reason to believe it will not, as of tomorrow morning, I am dispatching to the Ministry of Planning with some alacrity a letter requesting that we meet and that preparations be made for transferring all of our information and documents to the Tobago House of Assembly. And let me pause there for a moment. I am very concerned. The whole Caribbean talking about reparations now. Now that the slave owners and the descendants of rapists passing through the Caribbean, taking photos up and down the place. The whole Caribbean talking about reparations. But Tobago have a set of its historical records down in Trinidad. And nobody seemed to care about taking them back to Tobago. And I'm giving signal, and not just Ministry of Planning, but those of our documents that reside in the National Archives, all of our artifacts that belong to Tobago and is in Trinidad, we are coming for all of them. They belong to us.
Member for Palatine, answer me. You have 10 more minutes.
Sure. The Tobago Spatial Development Strategy will have to be ratified, so I will bring that to the House and ratify that at a later point once that strategy is built out and agreed upon by the Executive. Approval for the continued work on and the completion of the Spatial Development Plan be granted. Preparation for the automation of the application and approval process be commenced. And this is something we want to get on sooner rather than later. We can't be fumbling around with documents. And the benefit of this, Madam Presiding Officer, is that when you go to our units like land registry and so on, and inland revenue, every single time an officer has to take up a piece of document and handle it to photocopy it, that document can depreciate based on the age of the document. If we digitize our documents, a request comes for a cadastral or something, you just print it out while safeguarding the original document, because some of these records will be extremely old. Some would have predated us as an independent country. And so digitization works also in that benefit. Preparation for public review of complex types of applications be commenced as well. And I'm very clear about that. Any major construction in Tobago, they have to do like Secretary James has been doing, he and his team, going out to the public and asking what you think. So people could say, I don't like this, I don't like that. James will fight up with the seating, start on land, do this first, do that second. So you have a chance to say what you like and don't like for any complex planning facility. A communication plan for continued interface with the communities throughout Tobago be done. An advisory tongue planning panel to the Secretary for Planning, similar to the advisory panel to the Minister of Planning, be established to consider appeals. And as soon as we get the structure set up, that will be one of the first things we will do. So your appeals will not be to any panel down in Trinidad. Your appeals will happen right here in Tobago by Tobagonians who understand your own land use and understand the nuances in Tobago. I want to end this first part of my contribution by speaking to some of the benefits. And the speakers who will come after me will speak to some of the other benefits of doing this. One, devolution of authority. That's one of the benefits. It means that there is decision-making closer to the locality where the development is to take place. That affords better policy alignment and sensitivity to the realities at local level, which can be lost when the national scale is taken into account. And we all know of areas in Tobago still deemed as farmlands. But when you drive, there's all kind of big supermarket and commercial activity and all sort of big houses built there. But again, only devolution of power and authority in this case and function in this case will allow the function of tongue and country planning to be closer to the locality and allow it to be better aligned to our needs. Recently, I learned that right in Sergeant Kane, consider that as farmlands. What part of Sergeant King look like farmlands? Right in tongue. But guess what? At the moment, somebody in Trinidad deciding that for you, not you. The initiation of updated land use plans, the THA can have a greater direction over the consultation and development of Tobago's spatial development strategy and the land use plans. Currently, that responsibility is lodged with the minister in section 5 of chapter 35.1, and this Tobago spatial development strategy will provide internal regional guidance on what are the broad development imperatives for districts in Tobago, from which the land use plan will provide detailed land use zones to rationalize the sustainable utilization of land, and in particular, allow for the preservation of agricultural land for agricultural purposes and the conservation of environmentally sensitive areas, especially in the hilly and often vulnerable eastern side of Tobago, which now has the designation of man and the biosphere. A third benefit is better administration of applications. Currently, the average age of an application reaching the final point of approval is 5 months. So on average, it takes you 5 months for approval. Clearly, nobody is considering the ease of doing business in Tobago, and that is contrary to the standard actually set by Chapter 35.1, which mandates that nationally it should be 2 months maximum. This is due to backlogs within the system at Town and Country Planning and also our Public Health Department. This is complicated further by applications requiring approvals from Fire Service and WASA. Currently, there are over 300 plans with defects between these two agencies in Trinidad, covering the period 2015 to present. So we have over 300 plans down in Trinidad. And I don't understand why WASA have to take our plans down in Trinidad. Why Fire Service has to take our plans down in Trinidad? Isn't there a department in Tobago? Why not hire the relative staff in Tobago and do it locally? And what we hope to do is to be able to bring all the players in one room, around one table, look at all the applications so that things are not being passed from this desk to a desk over yonder, and a desk back in our next place, and a desk over so and over back wrong so. We're not doing the shadow type direction of go wrong so, come back so, go wrong so. Bringing everything into one space to allow for greater efficiency and speed with treating with these applications. Fourth, it allows for better economic performance. These 300 plus unsigned applications are deferred dreams of residents or nationals intended to develop the island. Think about that for a moment. Think about how many construction companies, how many of those youth men in the village could I get a work building somebody's house, building out somebody's business. That is deferred because our things only go to pack up in Trinidad, and Tobago doesn't deserve any kind of development as per the attitudes of the central government. And it's not just this central government, the one past and all of them past is the same thing, because all of them were there and did not see to fix this issue. The ease of doing business, and I spoke about that, it cannot take 5 months on average just to get a plan approved. Cannot. Your circumstances could change in 5 months. No investor waiting that long to know whether or not they could invest or not invest. They'll move on. And I could tell you, we have foreign direct investments as per information sent to me by InvestTT, a function and a company under the Ministry of Trade, where foreigners apply for the land license, for all kind of FDIs, waiting 3 and 4 years and no answer. No yes, no, wait a minute, nothing, no answer, just no answer. Meanwhile, the THA sit down here having the power in law to carry out the function and not doing it. If we don't mind our business, them will not mind it for you. Because in their mind, Tobago's business is not a priority. And if we don't prioritize Tobago's business, no one else will do it for us. And this administration is about prioritizing the business of the people of Tobago. And finally, as a final benefit, it will allow for enhanced labor force profile. The adoption of the function of town and country planning will require the recruitment of skilled technical staff in areas like GIS, computer programming, networking, land use planning, and currently, town and country planning development staff complement is just about 11, and the adoption of functions will require at least 8 new technical positions for it to run smoothly. Other areas likely to benefit will include surveillance, reporting and curtailing of illegal development, squatting, and the control of billboards and roadside advertisements, among others. Madam Presiding Officer, this is an important motion. This is a clear signal that Tobago means business about its autonomy. I will say it again. We cannot walk around this place making noise for greater autonomy, and the powers we do have, we are not utilizing them. We have to use the powers we actually have, and that will facilitate Tobago's growth and development. And so I say to those in the business sector, those trying to do development, those private developers on the island, those Tobagonians in the construction sector, those waiting to get approval for your homes, those being told that your building can't be taller than a coconut tree because somebody in Trinidad thinks that the furthest height we could reach is that of a coconut tree. I say to you, your wait is almost to an end because this new administration is bringing home the function for town and country planning, which will result in greater development for the people of Tobago and will position Tobago in that place where we are well on our way to making Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Honorable members, the question proposed is, whereas Section 25(1) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996 provides as follows, without prejudice to Section 75(1) of the Constitution, the Assembly shall, in relation to Tobago, be responsible for the formulation and implementation of policy in respect of the matters set out in the 5th schedule. And whereas Section 25(2) of the said Act empowers the Assembly to do all such acts and take all such steps as may be necessary for or incidental to the exercise of its powers or for the discharge of its duties. And whereas town and country planning is one of the matters set out in the 5th schedule as item number 15, and whereas the institutional structure has not been put in place to implement this function, be it resolved that this House authorize the Executive Council to take immediate steps to establish the institutional structure for the implementation of the town and country planning function by the Assembly in accordance with the Tobago House of Assembly Act of 1996.